astute investigators of the Russiagate phenomenon. He was the one who interviewed Luke Harding, who penned that horrible Guardian article that we debunked here. He was the interviewer of Harding, and Luke wrote a book called Collusion, all about the collusion between Trump and Russia. And except he didn't have any evidence for it, and to the point where when he was asked for it, he just left the interview. Aaron Maté is here with us right now. He now currently writes for The Nation magazine. Hi, Aaron. How are you?
Hey, Jimmy. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being with us. I want to talk to you specifically today about the Mueller released on Tuesday night his sentencing memo or guideline for Flynn, right? So now let's remind people Flynn was indicted for lying to the FBI, and what he was accused of doing was talking to the Russian foreign ambassador to the United States, Sergei. How do you say his name?
Sergei Kislyak.
Kislyak. There you go. And but what the other part of that story is never told is the reason why he was reaching out to the Russian ambassador was he was doing it on behalf of Israel and Netanyahu. They wanted the Trump campaign to talk to Putin to do their bidding of Israel at the UN. They always leave that part out. So the real collusion there, by the way, Russia didn't go through with it. They didn't honor Flynn's request. So the real collusion there is between Israel and the Trump, but no one ever talks about that, which is kind of interesting. So he was charged with lying to the FBI, and so now he's cooperating with the Mueller investigation. So Mueller released again on Tuesday his guidelines for sentencing, what he thinks Mueller should get. Turns out he doesn't think he should get anything. And so I just want to point real quickly, Aaron, I'm going to show you how Politico covered this, and then I'm going to get your reaction to how they covered it. So Politico says, what the Flynn memo tells us about the Mueller investigation. And it says the sentencing memo, in its own low-key way, signals that Mueller is taking the collusion seriously and pushing forward with it. Now, I think it actually says the opposite, but it also the Politico also goes on to say the third issue. So there's three things that they're dealing with Flynn. One of them is collusion, one is obstruction of justice, and the other one is a criminal investigation. We don't know exactly what that is. The third issue may or may not involve Trump's problematic payoffs, but whatever it is, says Politico, after 19 Flynn interviews, federal prosecutors must know an awful lot about it. That cannot be good for Trump. So again, to me, Aaron, the big thing here is that well, what is the big thing to you?
The takeaway for me from that Mueller memo about Flynn is that Mueller is kind of like a dope peddler. He's giving Russiagate devotees like enough to meet their fix, but not enough to kick it. So he redacts a whole bunch of stuff, which then leaves it up to the imagination what exactly Flynn cooperated on that Mueller is not telling us. But what it certainly does not tell us in that memo that was released is anything concrete about collusion. Like, people can imagine that it might be there behind those redactions, but the fact is, there's one distinction that I think is important to note out. So Mueller says that Flynn has provided substantial assistance in a case that has nothing to do with his Russia investigation. That's the unspecified criminal matter that you alluded to. And that section is entirely redacted.
So here, let me show. If you go to my computer, Arnold, I'll show the people. This is that section. And it says the defendant has provided substantial assistance in a criminal investigation. So we don't know exactly what that criminal investigation is. A lot of people have speculated what it is. Let's not worry about that. But here is the part about collusion. This is from the Mueller memo. And in it says the defendant has also assisted with. So there's a different level of assistance there. The assistance in the criminal investigation is substantial. The assistance in the collusion investigation is just he assisted. So it's a much lower level, right? Am I correct to infer that?
Well, see, that's what I inferred upon reading it. Now there are like I have heard from legal experts who say that I'm reading too much into it in noting that, but then I've heard from others who say that actually that does look like an important distinction. So I'm actually not sure what to conclude from that, but I just think it's worth pointing out. And regardless, the point is that like this entire section is redacted on an unrelated criminal matter, and that's what Mueller puts at the top. And that what that likely is about lobbying, Flynn's lobbying when it comes to Turkey, and possibly his cooperation against other people who were involved in that. Which is totally separate from the Russia investigation. And then when it gets below that to the Russia investigation, that's when Mueller says that Flynn has also assisted, and there is some parts detailed there about like the period during the transition, which again is after the campaign, which is Mueller's mandate, is what happened during the campaign. But Mueller says that Flynn assisted on matters related to the transition, so the period after the election, and then there's some other parts that are redacted. And what I was saying, like, so those parts that are redacted, who knows? Maybe that's where Flynn is revealing some grand conspiracy. But there's not like Mueller's giving the collusion hopeful enough there to keep using their imagination. But in terms of what was actually given. And not a subject of speculation, is there's nothing on collusion so far, and that's been the case 2 years into this investigation.
So, in fact, Aaron, one of the biggest Russiagate pushers is a guy named Michael Isikoff, right? He even wrote a book pushing Russiagate, and so he was presented with this same Mueller sentencing memo, and it was interesting to see him kind of be the word you used was sober about this new information. So I'm gonna play that right now because I think it's interesting to see, like, now finally someone who's a huge Russiagator is actually taking a reasoned look at the evidence instead of over amplifying every piece of evidence that confirms his bias, which is Russiagate is real. Now he's actually taking an objective look at it, and watch what it sounds like on a panel at CNN. Here we go.
Some people are reading more into this than is really there. If you really parse it, there appears to be a reference to 3 investigations that Flynn has been cooperating with, only one of which is the Russia mandate of Robert Mueller. Coordination between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin. The other 2 are other criminal investigations that it appears Mueller has farmed out to other U.S. attorneys or other prosecutors in the Justice Department. And if you look at the wording and how Flynn's cooperation is described in each of these 3, you see the phrase substantial assistance in the criminal investigation, non-Russia. That suggests Flynn has provided information about somebody else. He's fingered somebody who they can bring prosecutions against. When you get to the Russia portion, they don't use the phrase substantial assistance. They say has also assisted. And then in the third matter, they say has provided useful information. So that tells me that we don't necessarily get from this evidence that Flynn has dimed somebody out on the core Russia investigation. He's fingered others about something else.
So to me, that's Michael Isikoff actually saying, well, this is actually less of a smoking gun than we thought. And it's just really about a separated criminal investigation that doesn't really have anything to do with collusion. That's what it looks like to you. That's what it looks like to me. And it also looks that way to huge Russiagate pusher Michael Isikoff, correct?
Yes. Let me say one word in defense of Isikoff. Now, I've had him on The Real News when I was there, and we had some testy exchanges. But of all the journalists who have been covering Russiagate extensively, and I know he had a book called Russian Roulette, co-authored with David Korn, who is a much more, I think, vocal collusion proponent than Isikoff is. I've always found Isikoff to be the most serious of that whole bunch, and he's a very accomplished reporter. I mean, he wrote the definitive book called Hubris on the Bush administration's fixing of intelligence to justify the war in Iraq. So I've always thought Isikoff to be somewhat sober for still being in that crowd. And so I'm not surprised to see him there offering some reasoned analysis, and we'll see. I mean, again, there are redactions in that Mueller thing, so who knows what's there. But in terms of what we can go on, it just, there doesn't seem, it's not there right now.
Okay. All right. So we'll stay tuned. And what's happening actually today is that Mueller is dropping more sentencing recommendations for Cohen, right, who pled guilty. And is there someone else that he's dropping a recommendation for?
Yes. So Paul Manafort as well.
Okay.
And,
Paul.
yeah.
All right. So we'll have you back on and talk about that as soon as we find out more about it. Thanks for being on, Aaron.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Our next live Jimmy Dore show is February 1st in Burbank, California. Go to jimmydorcomedy.com for a list of all our live shows, and please become a premium member if you can. Become a patron. It's the way we support this show because they're coming at us, and we give you bonus. We give you hours of bonus material every week. Check it out. Become a patron. And if you can, make sure you're still subscribed. They unsubscribe people every day. I know it sounds crazy. It only takes a second. Please make sure and click that bell when you subscribe so they'll send you a notice